Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again. In this YouTube astrological segment, I'm going to be dissertating and talking about part 2 of Astrology and Death. Now I want to cover that, some people may have the misconception that, the 8th house and Pluto are, the primary thing. Well, they are the primary things, but, they might have the misconception that those, Pluto in the 8th house, Scorpio, those are the only things related, that could be pertaining to death. But also, some of you may notice that the 4th house in astrology governs the end of life. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some things first connected with, the 4th house cusp, and show some examples how, that might play a role possibly in death. Now, Nicole Brown Simpson was brutally murdered on June 12, 1994. Now, there might not be irrebuttable evidence, or wasn't proven irrebuttably, I should say. I think there was almost irrefutable evidence, that's my opinion, but I'm strongly suspicious, as is, a consensus viewpoint, that O.J. Simpson was the perpetrator. But anyway, the 4th house, besides ruling home and family, can show, can also govern the end of life. At this time, the transiting sun was conjunct Nicole's 4th house cusp on this day, and sadly, she did perish on this day. Oddly enough, Pluto was transiting O.J. Simpson's 4th house as well, and this not only, in his case, it may have not been the end of life. I felt like it should have been not literally the end of his life, but the end of his, good, existence that he had. Unfortunately, that didn't happen until a later point in time when he was convicted of some other crime. But anyway, if Pluto's transiting the 4th house in someone's chart, it could often mean that not just something possibly at their end of life, but could be something destructive connected with the person's home and family life, and maybe could be a death. And unfortunately, in this sad case, he more than likely was the perpetrator, and Nicole Simpson had who at least was his wife previously. I don't know if they were divorced or what was happening, but it was at least a previous family member had perished, and I believe probably at his hands. And Pluto transiting the 4th often indicates a death of a family member. Now, in another example, this is more close to home, personal thing. On July 25th, 1993, my grandfather died of a heart attack. On this day, Pluto in Scorpio was transiting his solar 4th house, and it was conjuncting it as well. Also, it closely squared his natal sun in Leo, and we know, Leo rules the heart, in astrology. The sun at that time, I believe transiting sun, made a long conjunction to his solar 8th house ruler. Which was about at the time, when we say, actually, let me go to something else. His progressed sun made long conjunction to his solar 4th house cusp, which is something. His progressed sun, was in 3 degrees Scorpio at the time, and at this, in 4th house cusp, 4th house can rule, the end, the period at the end of life. So I think there were indicators there that, as far as his, his death transpiring. Now, another thing I'm going to talk about, if somebody has, the 8th house afflicted, and say the ruler of the 8th house has predominantly adverse or negative aspects, it doesn't necessarily indicate, a grueling or horrible death, but I think if it has a lot of negative aspects, the ruler of the 8th house, it could show that maybe the conditions may not be auspicious or may not be favorable at the time of death. It doesn't necessarily mean the death is going to be necessarily negative, but it could mean that there might be some other conditions that might not be good at the time of this person's death. And keep in mind that also that the 8th house rules more than just death. It could rule transformation, regeneration, taxes, inheritance. It's also often associated with astrology and the occult. So just because somebody has an afflicted 8th house doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have, negative conditions at the time of death, but it could increase those chances. Another thing I want to talk about that, could be related, maybe give a person an indication, maybe conditions that, as far as their death may go. Look at the 8th house ruler and see what house that planet of the ruler of the 8th house resides in. If somebody, say, has a ruler of the 8th in the 6th house, it might show that maybe, death might occur, connected with some debilitating illness, or it could be multiple illnesses the person might have, which may at least be maybe not 100% attributed to, but could be a contributing factor. And let's say, give another hypothetical example. If somebody has the ruler of the 8th house posited in their 4th house, maybe the person, could possibly die at home, since the 4th rules the home. So anyway, if somebody has, let me give you one more example. If, say, hypothetically, a person has the ruler of the 8th house in their 12th house, and that's a lot of times, the 12th house is connected with things hidden, concealed, or maybe could be kind of a mystery, or somebody. Person may die maybe in a way where, maybe where it caused some confusion, and people didn't, even if they knew the reason that he or she had died, was somewhat, maybe surprised and couldn't quite understand why the death occurred. It could be something vague and nebulous associated with the person's death. So anyway, people, that will conclude part 2 of Astrology and Death, and tune in next time, where I'll be continuing my series with the aspects to the midheaven. And until next time, people, stay well.